There is something about Keanu Reeves that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. It is not just his talent or his memorable roles that have made him a legend. It is the way he carries himself through life with a quiet grace that most people never truly notice. He has faced tragedy that would break most of us. He lost his best friend to an overdose.
Don't give up!
He lost the love of his life in a devastating accident. He lost a child he never got to hold. Yet somehow, through all of that unimaginable pain, he never became bitter or hard. Instead, he became softer, kinder, and more generous with his time, his money, and his heart. He gives away millions without ever seeking attention.
I have to go. Stay here.
He treats every person he meets with genuine respect, whether they are a studio executive or a crew member on set. That is why Keanu Reeves inspires me. That is why I believe his story matters more than just his movies. And that is why today, I want to share something remarkable with you. Before Keanu became the icon we all know and love, there was a night that changed everything. A night no one ever talks about. A stormy, terrifying night in 1993 that bonded him to another rising star in a way neither of them could have ever predicted. This is the story of how Keanu Reeves first met Sandra Bullock. And I promise you, it is unlike anything you have ever heard. The air felt different that evening. It was the kind of stillness that arrives just before something is about to change, though no one ever recognizes it in the moment. First drops of rain fall against the asphalt like whispered warnings. The city below flickered through a glowing mist, its lights blurred and uncertain, as if no opposite itself was holding its breath. There was a heaviness pressing down from the hill, something from the storm around the atmosphere. That lower night spread, and the night carried a tension that seemed to seep into the bones of the outside. Keanu Reeves was alone, winding through the empty road. He often wrote about his thoughts became too loud, when the weight of auditions and expectations and memories of people he had lost pressed too heavily against his chest. The rain was getting stronger now, thick sheets of water that turned the headlight beam into a blurred cone of white. The smart thing would have been to pull over and wait it out. But something kept him moving forward, something he could not name. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was that restless energy that had always lived inside him, pushing him to keep going even when stopping made more sense. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Maybe it was fate reaching out with invisible hands, pulling him toward a moment that would change more than he could ever understand. The storm hit with a fury that caught even the weathered riders of Lowe's Angels off guard. This was no ordinary California rain. It was an El Nino system, the kind that turns gentle hillsides into rivers of mud and transforms quiet roads into deadly traps. Keanu slowed his bike as the visibility dropped to almost nothing. His leather jacket was soaked through, and the cold had crept into his fingers, making the handlebars slick and harder to grip. He knew these roads well, every curve memorized through years of late-night rides. But tonight, the road felt different, unfamiliar, and dangerously alive. And that is when he saw it through the downpour, a faint glow in the distance, a single tail light blinking red against the darkness ahead. As he got closer, his heart began to pound harder. A sedan had gone off the road, its front wheels hanging over the edge of a steep ravine. The hillside beneath it was nothing but sliding mud, and the car was tilting slowly, inch by inch, toward the drop. Keanu brought his motorcycle to a stop and pulled off his helmet. The rain pounded against his face as he squinted through the darkness, trying to see if anyone was inside. Then he heard it, a voice, muffled and frightened, barely audible over the roar of the storm. Someone was trapped inside that car, and the ground beneath them was disappearing by the second. Keanu did not hesitate. He did not think about his own safety or the risk of the hillside giving way beneath his feet. He simply moved, his boots sliding in the mud as he made his way toward the teetering vehicle. Every step felt uncertain, the earth beneath him soft and unstable. But he kept going, his focus narrowing to a single point, that voice, that person who needed help. When he reached the car, he could see a figure inside, pressed against the driver's side window. The door was jammed against a mound of mud, completely blocked. He tried to open it, but the weight of the earth held it shut. The car groaned and shifted another inch toward the edge. He could hear the person inside gasp, their panic rising with every tiny movement of the vehicle. Keanu pressed his palm flat against the cold glass. He needed to stay calm. He needed them to stay calm, too. He spoke through the window, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around him, telling them not to move, not to shift their weight, promising that he would find a way to get them out, asking them to just breathe and stay with him. The figure inside turned toward his voice. He could not see their face clearly through the rain-streaked glass and the heavy darkness. But he could sense their fear, their desperate hope, their complete trust in this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. It was a heavy responsibility, that kind of trust, and Keanu felt the weight of it settle onto his shoulders as the car groaned again and the mud continued to slide slowly beneath the rear wheels. He looked around frantically, searching for anything that could help. His motorcycle sat 20 feet away, rain bouncing off its frame. A tow strap was strapped to the back, the one he always carried for emergencies. But how could he anchor the car when there was nothing solid to hold on to? The trees were too far, the road was crumbling, and time was running out with every passing second. He could feel the person inside, waiting for him to do something, believing he had a plan, but the truth was that he had no idea what to do next. He had one chance to save this person, one chance to do something huge. But as he looked at the impossible situation before him, the rain pounding down, he realized the odds were set against him. All he knew was that he could not walk away. All he knew was that whoever was inside that car was Keanu Reeves had never been the kind of man to let someone down. The car shifted again, and he heard the person inside cry out in fear. There was no more time to think. There was only time to act. He sprinted back to his motorcycle, his boots sinking into the mud with every step. He grabbed the tow strap from the back of the bike and looked around desperately for something to anchor it to. Then he saw it, a metal guardrail post about 15 feet up the road, half buried in weeds but still standing firm. It was not much, but it was all he had. He ran to the post and wrapped one end of the strap around it, pulling with all his strength to test if it would hold. The metal groaned but stayed in place. It would have to be enough. Keanu ran back to the car, unspooling the strap behind him. The vehicle had tilted even further now, its headlights pointing down into the black emptiness of the ravine below. He could hear the person inside breathing fast, their panic growing with every creak of the metal frame. He circled to the back of the sedan and dropped to his knees in the mud, searching for something to hook the strap onto. His fingers found the rear axle, slick with rain and grime. He looped the strap around it once, twice, 3 times, then pulled it tight. The fabric bit into his hands as he held on, the full weight of the car now transferred to his arms and the thin guardrail post behind him. The strap cut into his forearm, slicing through his jacket and into his skin. He felt the sharp sting of blood mixing with rain, but he did not let go. He could not let go. He shouted through the storm, telling the person inside to climb into the back seat. His voice was calm despite the chaos, steady like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog. He told them to move slowly, to keep their weight low, to crawl toward the rear window. The car rocked dangerously with each movement from inside, and Keanu dug his heels deeper into the mud, using every ounce of his strength to keep the vehicle from sliding over the edge. He could feel the strap slipping through his bleeding hands, could feel his muscles screaming for relief. But he held on because someone was counting on him, because that was the only thing that mattered in that moment. The rear window was small, barely big enough for a person to squeeze through. He saw hands appear first, pale and trembling, reaching out into the darkness. Then shoulders, then a head. The person was climbing out inch by inch, their body silhouetted against the faint glow of the car interior light. Keanu reached forward with one hand while keeping the other wrapped in the strap. He grabbed their wrist and pulled, his voice encouraging them to keep coming, promising that he had them, that he was not going to let them fall. Their fingers gripped his forearm so tightly he could feel their nails digging into his skin through his soaked jacket. And then, in one terrible moment, the earth gave way completely beneath the car. The sedan lurched backward, metal screaming against rock as it began its final slide into the ravine. Keanu pulled with everything he had left, yanking the person free of the window just as the car disappeared into the darkness below. They tumbled together onto the muddy road, rolling away from the crumbling edge as the sound of crashing metal echoed up from the canyon. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just lay there in the rain, gasping for breath, alive against all odds. Keanu pushed himself up onto his knees and looked at the person he had just saved. But the darkness was too complete, the rain too heavy. All he could see was a shape, a figure, someone shaking with cold and fear. He asked if they were okay, and he heard a voice respond, a woman, her words broken and trembling with shock. She was okay. She was alive. That was all that mattered. In the distance, he heard sirens beginning to wail, red and blue lights flickering through the rain somewhere down the mountain road. Help was coming. She would be safe now. Keanu stood up slowly, his injured arm hanging at his side. He looked down at the woman one more time, wanting to say something. The lights were getting closer. What happened when they arrived? There would be questions and cameras and attention, and Keanu had never wanted any of that. He had not saved this woman for the promise of praise. He had saved her because it was the right thing to do. So the person that Keanu Reeves walked back to his motorcycle. He pulled on his helmet, climbed up his seat, and disappeared through the swing like a ghost. The woman sat in the elevator and laughed blankly. She answered their questions as though her mind still replaying those terrifying minutes over and over. Who was he, they asked, who pulled you out? But she did not know. She had never seen his face. All she remembered was a voice, calm and steady in the chaos, telling her to breathe and to trust him. She remembered strong hands pulling her to safety. She remembered the outline of a leather jacket and a motorcycle helmet. But she could not give them a name, because he had vanished without ever telling her who he was. The woman was Sandra Bullock. She was 29 years old, an actress still searching for her big break, driving home from a late meeting when the storm had caught her on that treacherous road. She had almost died that night, and a stranger had risked his own life to save her without asking for anything in return. As the ambulance drove her down the mountain, she pressed her forehead against the cold window and made a silent promise to herself. If she ever found out who he was, she would thank him properly. She would let him know that his kindness had changed her life forever. Weeks passed, and the memory of that night stayed with Sandra like a wound that would not quite heal. She could not stop thinking about the shadow man, as she had started calling him in her mind. His voice echoed in her dreams, calm and commanding, pulling her back from the edge of death. She told no one about her obsession, fearing that people would think she was losing her grip on reality. Meanwhile, her career was finally beginning to move forward. She received a call about a screen test for a new action movie called Speed. It was the opportunity she had been waiting for her entire life. She had no way of knowing that the audition room would bring her face to face with a truth she was not prepared to discover. Sandra stood outside the casting office on the Fox studio lot, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the sides of the script. The morning sun was warm against her face, but she felt cold inside, nervous in a way that went beyond the usual audition jitters. This was the biggest opportunity of her career, a lead role in a major action film called Speed, opposite an actor who was already becoming one of the most talked-about names in Hollywood. She had heard stories about Keanu Reeves, how he was quiet and kind and nothing like the typical leading man. But she had never met him before. Today would be their first introduction, a chemistry read to see if they could convince an audience that their characters would trust each other with their lives. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her racing heart, but her mind kept drifting back to the storm, to the night on Mulholland Drive that still haunted her dreams. It had been weeks now, and the memory had not faded even a little. She could still hear the rain pounding against the glass, still feel the car sliding beneath her, still remember that voice cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. The Shadow Man. She did not know his name or his face. She only knew his voice and the way it had made her feel safe in the most terrifying moment of her life. She had tried to find him, asking the paramedics and the police if anyone had reported seeing a motorcyclist on the road that night. But there were no leads, no answers. He had vanished like a ghost, leaving her with nothing but questions and a debt she could never repay. A production assistant opened the door and called her name. Sandra smoothed down her shirt, tucked the script under her arm, and walked inside. The room was smaller than she expected, with a camera set up in one corner and a long table where the director and producers sat with coffee cups and notepads. And there, standing near the window with his back to the door, was Keanu Reeves. He turned when she entered, and their eyes met for the first time. He gave her a small, shy smile and extended his hand. His grip was warm and firm, and Sandra felt a strange flutter in her chest, something she could not quite explain. There was something familiar about him, though she was certain they had never crossed paths before. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the task at hand. This was her moment. The director explained what he wanted to see. It was the heart of the movie, the moment when the bus is ready to explode and the two characters must trust each other to survive. I wanted to see raw emotion, genuine connection, the kind of chemistry that could not be faked. Their positions across the something was wrong. The words felt flat. Two strangers reciting lines without any real feeling behind them. Sandra could see this. wasn't working. The magic was not there. The director held up his hand and stopped them. He leaned forward in his chair and studied them both for a long moment. Then he spoke in a quiet, serious voice. He told them to forget the script. He told them to imagine they were actually about to die, that their lives depended on trusting this stranger in front of them completely. He wanted them to improvise, to find something real between them. Whatever walls they had built up, he needed them to tear those walls down. Sandra glanced at Keanu, and she saw something shift in his expression. His eyes grew distant for a moment, as if he was reaching deep inside himself for a memory he had locked away. Keanu closed his eyes and took a slow breath. When he opened them again, something had changed. He stepped closer to Sandra and reached out, taking her wrist gently but firmly in his hand. And then he spoke, and the world around Sandra seemed to fall away. His voice was calm and steady, cutting through the silence of the room like a beacon. He told her to look at him. He told her to stay in the seat and not let go. He promised her that he was going to get her out, that she just needed to breathe and stay with him. The words were different from the script, but the tone was exactly the same. It was the voice from the storm. It was the voice of the shadow man. Sandra felt the blood drain from her face. Her heart stopped, then started again at twice its normal speed. She stared at Keanu, her mouth slightly open, her mind racing to catch up with what her body already knew. It was him. The man who had saved her life on that terrible night was standing right in front of her, holding her wrist, looking into her eyes with the same calm intensity she remembered from the darkness. She could not breathe. She could not think. The room around her faded to nothing, and all she could see was his face, finally clear after weeks of wondering. And then she saw it. His sleeve had ridden up slightly when he grabbed her wrist, and there on his forearm was a scar. It was fresh and pink, the kind of wound that comes from something cutting deep into the skin. Sandra remembered the sound of the strap straining against the weight of her car. She remembered how he had held on even as the metal sliced into his flesh. That scar was proof. That scar was the answer to every question that had kept her awake at night. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she could not stop them from falling. But she did not break character. Instead, she channeled every ounce of emotion into the scene, letting the gratitude and relief and overwhelming wonder pour out of her. She looked into Keanu's eyes and spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper, but carried more truth than any line she had ever delivered. She told him that she trusted him. She told him that she had always trusted him. The words came from somewhere deep inside her, from the woman who had almost died on a dark road and the stranger who had refused to let her fall. The room was completely silent. The director sat frozen in his chair, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. The producers exchanged stunned glances, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Nobody spoke for a long moment. And in that silence, Sandra and Keanu remained locked in their positions, the weight of their shared secret hanging invisibly between them. He did not know that she knew. He had no idea that the woman he had saved and the actress standing before him were the same person. But Sandra knew, and now she had to decide what to do with that knowledge. The director finally broke the silence. He set down his coffee cup and leaned back in his chair with a look of pure amazement on his face. He said he had been doing this for 20 years and had never seen anything like what he had just witnessed. He said the roles were theirs if they wanted them. But Sandra barely heard the words. All she could focus on was Keanu, who was looking at her with confusion in his eyes, clearly moved by the intensity of the scene, but unaware of the real reason behind her tears. How do you thank someone for saving your life when they never expected to see you again? The audition ended, and Sandra did not move. As the producers gathered their notes, and the director shut down his hand. About how this movie was going to be something special. But Sandra, her mind was a storm of emotions, gratitude and wonder and a strange his humble nature evident in the way he deflected praise onto her instead. He had no idea. He truly had no idea that the woman he had pulled from the edge of death was standing right beside him. The room slowly emptied as people filed out to discuss next steps and schedules. Sandra knew this was her moment. If she let him walk away now, she might lose the courage to ever say what needed to be said. She called his name softly, and he turned back toward her with a questioning look in his eyes. She asked if they could talk outside for a moment, just the two of them. Keanu studied her face, perhaps noticing the tears that still lingered at the corners of her eyes. He nodded without asking why, and followed her out the door into the bright California sunshine. They walked together across the studio lot, past trailers and equipment trucks and busy crew members hurrying to their next tasks. Sandra led him to a quiet corner near the parking lot, where a low concrete wall offered a place to sit. She settled onto the sun-warmed surface and waited for him to join her. Keanu sat down beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. He waited patiently, giving her the space to find her words in her own time. That patience, that quiet kindness, only confirmed what she already knew about him. Sandra took a deep breath and turned to face him. She told him there was something she needed to say, something that might sound crazy at first. She asked him to listen until she finished, and he promised that he would. Then she began to speak, her voice soft but steady. She told him about a night in November, a storm on Mulholland Drive, a car sliding toward a cliff. She told him about the terror of feeling the ground give way beneath her and the certainty that she was going to die. And then she told him about the voice, the calm and steady voice that cut through her panic and gave her the strength to keep moving. She told him about the stranger who held onto a strap until it cut into his flesh, who pulled her to safety and then vanished into the rain without ever revealing his face. Keanu's expression changed as she spoke. His eyes widened slightly and she saw recognition dawn across his features. He remembered. Of course he remembered. How could anyone forget a night like that? Sandra reached out slowly and touched the scar on his forearm, the one she had glimpsed during the audition. She told him that she knew. She told him that the moment he grabbed her wrist and spoke in that voice, she knew he was the one who had saved her life. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and memory. For a long moment, Keanu said nothing. He looked down at the scar on his arm, then back up at Sandra's face. And then, slowly, a smile spread across his features. It was not a proud smile or a boastful one. It was shy and genuine and full of wonder. He shook his head slightly, as if he could not quite believe that fate had brought them together again in such an unexpected way. He told her that he had thought about her often, the woman in the car. He had wondered if she was okay, if she had recovered from the trauma of that night. He had never imagined that he would see her again, let alone work beside her. Sandra felt tears spilling down her cheeks again, but this time they were tears of joy. She thanked him over and over, trying to put into words the depth of her gratitude. She told him that he had given her a second chance at life, that every good thing that happened from this day forward was because of his courage. But Keanu shook his head gently and stopped her. He told her that she had saved herself. He had just held onto a strap. She was the one who found the strength to climb out of that window, to trust a stranger in the darkness, to keep breathing when everything seemed hopeless. The courage was hers. He had simply been there to witness it. That was the moment Sandra truly understood who Keanu Reeves was. He was not interested in being a hero. He did not want praise or recognition or gratitude. He simply wanted to help people and then step quietly back into the She realized that this was why he had left that night without waiting for the ambulance to arrive. He had not. He had only wanted to know that she was safe. Keanu made a request. The world did not need to know what happened on Mulholland Drive. It was their story. Something precious that belonged only to the two of them. Sandra went without hesitation. They sat together on that low wall for another hour, sharing stories and laughing and discovering how much they had in common. They talked about motorcycles and heartbreak and the strange paths that had led them both to this moment. And in that afternoon of simple conversation, a friendship was born. Not the kind of friendship built on fame or convenience, but something deeper. A bond forged in fire and rain, and the knowledge that one human being had risked everything for another without expecting anything in return. This story teaches us something profound about kindness. True kindness does not seek recognition. It does not wait for applause or praise. It simply acts because acting is right, because helping others is its own reward. Keanu Reeves could have stayed that night and accepted the gratitude of the paramedics and the police. He could have let the world know that he was a hero. But instead, he chose to disappear, to let his good deed remain invisible. That is the highest form of generosity, giving without any thought of receiving. This story also reminds us that our actions ripple outward in ways we can never predict. Keanu did not know that the woman he saved would become his close friend and collaborator. He did not know that their paths would cross again on a movie set years later. He simply did what was right in the moment and trusted that the universe would take care of the rest. And it did. Their friendship has lasted for decades, built on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared secret that binds them together. Finally, this story shows us the power of humility. In a world that constantly pushes us to promote ourselves and seek attention, Keanu Reeves stands as a reminder that the quietest people often have the biggest hearts. He has faced unimaginable tragedy in his life, yet he remains gentle and kind. He gives away millions to charity without ever speaking about it publicly. He treats everyone with equal respect, from the biggest stars to the newest crew members. His humility is not weakness. It is the greatest strength of all. So the next time you have an opportunity to help someone, remember the shadow man on Mulholland Drive. Remember that true heroism asks for nothing in return. Remember that the kindness you offer today may create ripples that touch lives for generations to come. And remember that in a world full of noise and self-promotion, there is still room for quiet grace. There is still room to be like Keanu.